And with that, I'll now hand the meeting over to our speaker and ask them to introduce themselves.
Thank you. My name's Steve. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Steve.
And yeah, it's nice to be in a room full of recovering alcoholics, mainly men. There's great to see some women and what have you. But as men, it's nice to be in a room talking about doing a deep dive in spiritual nature of recovery, isn't it? I mean, there were other things we spoke about in pubs, but this is quite different, isn't it? Yeah, I've been sober a while. I think I'm pre-MIW, which is pre-mobile phones, internet, and woke. So that's me. And obviously today, looking back, I look at when I came into AA. I honestly, I had no idea who I was, really. I had no idea who Steve was. I knew I existed. I knew that life was confusing. I knew that drinking was no longer working. But if you said, Steve, how do you feel, or what's going on in your mind, I was just in a state of shock. And I think that's very similar to a lot of newcomers. You know, you come in, I think one of the things about drinking is it's quite traumatic, really. You know, some of the things we get up to. I started drinking as a teenager. I remember the first time I got tipsy. In fact, the first drink I had, I drank into blackout. We drank cider and I drank into blackout, and I couldn't drink cider for years, but I persisted, and one day I could drink again, you know. And then I went through the cider stage again. But yeah, that was a blackout. I remember, you know, hardly anything really, and then I didn't drink for a while, and then as soon as I got to 18 or 17, my friends and I would go to the pubs and everything, and I would then be in pubs drinking and what have you. But it seemed to be okay. My drinking seems to be okay until one day when I was 18. So it's about a year after I started drinking. I found out when I asked for my birth certificate, because I needed to get a passport so that I could go on holiday to Europe with a girlfriend of mine. My mother said, "Oh, you know, don't you?" And I said, "No, what?" And I knew exactly what she was going to say. She was going to say, "Your father's not your real father." You know, I'd seen enough EastEnders and Coronation Street to sort of work these scenarios out, you know, and because my mother loved those soaps, you know, so it kind of seeped into me. Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, it was a complete shock. Absolute shock. I had no idea that this guy who I call father, and I have to say, I really idolised my father, and I was the eldest son as well. It really shocked me when she said that, and I just went numb. And then there was no more talk about it after that. Well, a little bit, but nothing much, no real process. Where I come from, there's no real process. Not the process that I've learned in AA, that I've learned working the program, because that's something you learn in AA is process. You know, in fact, I'd never heard the word process before until I got into AA. You know, and suddenly you'd be talking to someone and you'd want an answer to say, "Excuse me, I'm in process. I can't talk right now." So, okay, what does process mean? You know, and then I was to learn what process was. Anyway, and it didn't help either, training as a counsellor and becoming an addictions counsellor, running rehabs in prisons. You know, it was process all the time with counsellors. Anyway, that really, you know, when we talk about causes and conditions, when we do a step 4, I think that was the one for me. That was the one that just slew me, really. In one foul swoop, I lost my identity. I lost the position I had as a young man, 18, heavily identified with his father, thinking, well, you know, you're my role model, but now I know I am not the fruit of your loins. That means I don't know who I am. Who am I if you're not my father? Because the truth is, I'd always known that I wasn't like him anyway. do you know that suspicion of self you have growing up? And I used to look at my younger brother, who was just like him, and he was, in fact, his biological son. And I thought, God, you're so like Dad. How can I not be like Dad? And I wasn't. I was a wuss. I was sensitive. I used to do art and draw and read and all those things. And my brother would be fighting and destroying things, you know, just like his dad. And I thought, oh, God, man, why am I not like that? You know. So anyway, I wasn't like that. I was a lover, a poet, a lunatic, as Shakespeare would say, you know. So anyway, that's when my drinking started. That day, when my mother said that, I remember going to the pub and I drank into blackout. And that was to become the pattern until the age of 27, when I found myself in AA. And drinking on that, rather than processing it and talking about it, drinking on that just compounded the problem. And what it did was it confused me a lot. I ended up just not knowing who I was and just becoming an alcoholic. And in fact, it was at the age of 27, sort of nearly 10 years after this drinking, that I realised that I was a drunk. I remember my drinking had got so bad, and I used to make excuses like but I'm young, you know, this is what we do, we go out and get best, we laugh. But by the age of 27, nearly 28, all my friends were married, they had businesses, or they're doing things, and there I was still, you know, waking up after blackout and having been rude or having done stupid things or having embarrassed myself and all of those things. You know, and I realised that, and I remember trying to stop drinking and then being surprised that I couldn't, and being drunk again and all those things. And I woke up one day and I just thought, I'm just an alcoholic. I'm just a drunk. I didn't use the word alcoholic. I just thought I'm a drunk. And it's quite humbling, in fact. It was the first time I actually knew something about myself that actually landed, you know. So anyway, I you know, in the end, I think I annoyed so many people, that all my friends, that in the end I was given the ultimatum: either go to an AA meeting or get lost, you know. And so I went to an AA meeting in March 1995, and I went there full of self-pity, you know. How dare you call me an alcoholic? I just like a little drink. And already I'm already in the denial, you know, minimising. I'm young, all of those things. I got to AA and I heard a guy do a chair, Mike from Beaconsfield. He did this chair. He was an ex-copper, and I didn't like coppers. You know, the family I come from, we don't like police. You know, and but the thing was, this guy in his chair, he spoke about not just his drinking. He spoke about the madness. He spoke about what he got up to and how he justified it and how he drank and all these things. And I remember sitting there thinking, that's what I do. I could really identify with him, not just the drinking, but him. And he was a copper, and I thought, how can I be identified with a copper? You know, he'd been to prison, everything. You know, and he ended up, you know, in AA and everything. And I remember coming out of that first meeting, and the person who picked me up, I got in the car, and I said to him, I'm an alcoholic. I knew. I'm an alcoholic. It was through the identification with one alcoholic. And I couldn't tell you what an alcoholic was, but I could tell you one when I saw one. I was later to learn what an alcoholic was, but I knew what an alcoholic looked like. And he was the same as me. I thought, my God. It really shocked me. Anyway, I started going to one meeting a week. Obviously, I kept relapsing until I realised there were other meetings in the town, and you could do one meeting every day if you want to. And that's what I started doing. And I got into recovery. And in the beginning, I honestly, I was so traumatised. I was so numb. I couldn't share for a year. I couldn't share. I was so self-obsessed. I thought I was just shy, until someone said I was self-obsessed, and I thought, how dare you? How dare you call me self-obsessed? I'm shy. And so anyway, I was so self-obsessed. And after a few months of hearing the war stories, which I loved, I could identify with, I started to thaw out. The alcohol started to thaw out, and I started to feel the numbness was starting to go. And the first thing that I got, and people used to talk about resentments, and I thought, what are you on about resentments? I'm not resentful. You know, I was just numb, that was all it was. And the first feeling I got, because they say, you know, the good news and the bad news is you get your feelings back. The first thing I got was resentment. The first thing I got was that, and I couldn't believe it. I'd be listening to a war story, and this resentment, this little voice in my head would say, "You prick, you can't drink. You should go back out. You should try some more." You know, and I'd be horrible. This horrible voice in my head would be judging these people, where before I could be open-minded and hear it. Now I couldn't. But the thing was, I kind of knew that this was wrong. This was wrong. I thought, this is not right, you know, because it happened so suddenly. Anyway, that really encouraged me to get a sponsor. That's what made me get a sponsor. Up until then, I thought, sponsor, yeah. And the program, step 4, I'm not doing that. All those things were going through my head. I thought, I'll just sit here and listen to it. Now I'm getting a sponsor, and straight away, getting a sponsor, I'm working a program. And that was it. I then became, you know, in my drinking, I didn't know who I was. Getting into recovery, I became Steve working a program. Okay, but I wasn't liberated or anything. But I was Steve working a program, and then I became someone. I'm Steve working a program, and I began working this program. And to be honest with you, I found it quite intriguing. Interesting. The only thing I didn't like was the word gods. And I thought, okay, because I had a lot of guilt around gods. I've always had a deep belief in gods. I love Jesus, I love God. You know, I went to a Christian school, so I loved it. But during my drinking, I thought I'd turn my back on God. So I had this real deep paranoia that when I die, God's going to kill me, you know. You know, send me to hell. So I thought, oh no. When they said you've got to find God, I thought, oh no, he doesn't like me. I can't go there. So I tried to hide from God, and so I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll take a psychological approach to the 12 steps. And so that's what I did. I took a psychological approach. I thought, this is okay. Step 1, unmanageability. Yeah, there's the evidence of my life. I didn't really amount to much. I don't know who I am. I've ruined, relationships were terrible. And then when it got to step 2, it said, "So restores to sanity." I thought, I can get the insanity bit. It said, but God, I thought, but what I'll do is I'll have an open mind. An open mind, that will do me. An open mind. I'll have an open mind, you know. Come to believe that God, I'll be open-minded, and if I'm open-minded, the message will come through. You guys talking to me, the message will come through. So I've got an open mind. It's all right, God's not there. I'm hiding, and when it got to step 3, it said, we turn our life over, and I thought, okay. The evidence, they said, you just need the evidence, unmanageability, insanity, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, that's evidence, I'm insane, all right, I'll turn my will. But for me, turning my will and life over meant I'm prepared to work the program. Nothing to do with God. Okay, I work the program. So now the program means if I've got a problem, I'll work the program. Do you see what I mean? Can you see how my self-reliance is still in control? Huh? Self-reliance. He's still hiding from God, but he's working the program now. You see? So self-reliance is in there. He's got the gear sticks, good eye-hand coordination, So I'm doing my perfect step 3. Someone pisses me off. Right, process, that's it. I'm going to do some step 4. I've turned it over, you see. So then I began to do step 4, and in step 4, remarkably, I learned something really profound. I learned that in the column version of doing step 4, and if you haven't done it, it's fine. If ever you want to do it, it's brilliant. I'm not here to say what way you do it. It's just my story. And in it, right, it says who you pissed off with, and then it goes, what part of self has been affected? And I'm like, huh? Part of self? What do you mean? And it gave me this description of self. He said, we're all given instincts. We're all given self-propulsion elements to our nature, instincts, without which you wouldn't be motivated to do anything. So I thought, wow, I've got a self. So suddenly Steve, who doesn't know himself, who's now Steve working a program, is now Steve's got a self. So I was really impressed with that. I thought, this is amazing. I've got a self. Fuck, I didn't know that. So anyway, and then it says, but this self can manifest in ways that defeat you. And it goes into the next. I went, wow. So when I get triggered there, it manifests as that becomes a reaction to that. And that's myself, started to see it then, that's my self-obsession. I thought, shit, I'm only ever reacting to myself. I project it onto the world, but it's always only a reaction to myself. Oh, fuck. Wow, that's amazing. So anyway, I did that. And then that took me to step 5. And that honesty with self, God, another human being, that was remarkable. It was an incredible, any newcomer out there, just grab a sponsor and work this program. It's so fascinating. Anyway, I got through it, and I got through it successfully without God finding me, right? So I was totally psychologically working it. My self-reliance was gleaming, it was triumphant, and it was working this program. And then one day I decided, that's it, I'm on to the next level. Now, the next level, I'm 27, 28, maybe 29, and I thought, I know, I'm going to go to college now, do an access course, as you do. And, the equivalent of 3 A-levels, go to university and become someone, because I'm no one. I'm just Steve who didn't know who he was, Steve who's now working a program, and Steve now he's got a self. Now Steve is going to go and go back to college, and Steve's going to be successful. He's got a new future coming. So that's what I did. I went to college. In this access course, I did psychology, sociology, I did computers, and I did English literature for the dramatic side of myself. So just to appease the love of the poet, the lunatic, from Shakespeare. So anyway, I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I do it for a year, and it's amazing. But unfortunately, I fail it. I want to do this thing in a year. They give you the option to do it in a year or 2 years. I said a year. I took off more than I could chew. I've never written an essay in my life. At school I did nothing. Here I learned to do it. But I just failed, right? So I had to do it again. So I did. I went back. And these lessons really intrigued me. Psychology intrigued me. We did the theory of psychology. We studied the theory of Freud, Carl Jung, Adler, all of these people, the Skinner rats. Piaget, developmental stages, the 4 developmental stages, the 4th stage that no one really gets apart from a few. I said, wow, what stage is that? I need to get it, So anyway, I did that, and I was learning, but one in particular was sociology. Sociology, it's terrible for any alcoholic, doing an access course. Sociology is intoxicating. You start to learn about society. And I was doing this course, and one day the tutor was taking us through the Marxist theory of something, and she mentioned the phrase false class consciousness. And I thought, what does that mean? What can be false about consciousness? How can consciousness be false? How can you falsify someone's state of consciousness? I need to know why. So I pressed her. I said, what do you mean? And little did I know, the bell had gone and everyone had left the class. And it's just me standing there with my tutor by now. I said, what do you mean by false class consciousness? Well, I didn't realise. Looking back now, I still didn't know who I was. I'm desperately searching for who I was. I just didn't know that. There was something missing, and there was something missing. And she looked at me, and I was quite intense, I'll be honest with you. I was quite intense back then. Not so much now. Love a poet lunatic. Anyway, she looked at me, big woman, handsome woman. She looked at me and she said, you're not your thoughts or your feelings. And that shocked me. I was shocked. I thought, no one has ever told me that before. No one's ever told me that I am not you are not your thoughts and feelings. because I don't know who I am, but there's one thing that I do know, is that when I get a thought or a feeling, I do a step 4. And I'm Steve who works a program. And if my thoughts and feelings aren't who I am, then who the fuck am I? And that really frightened me. That really frightened me. See, look. See? The drama just follows me. So anyway, 5 minutes. So I remember walking away that day from the college, and it shocked me. And I think I've probably understated how much it shocked me, because I didn't go back to college after that day. It stunned me. It shocked me, and I thought, if I'm not my thoughts and feelings, then who am I? I asked the question like Ramana Maharaj, who am I? And I went to AA, and I was talking. I went to that and I was sharing, and suddenly, halfway through my share, I stopped talking. I thought, why are you talking, Steve? You're not your thoughts and your feelings. Why are you bullshitting? You're not, why are you? And so I walked away from AA, and for about a week, I just was walking around the town just thinking, I don't know who I am. So it caught up with me. Not knowing who I am caught up with me, And so one night I thought, I can't do this anymore. If I'm going to drink again if I don't. And by now I'm 3.5 years sober, by the way. I thought, this doesn't feel good. And suddenly I was back into self-obsession and the fear. And I thought, if I don't deal with this, I'm going to drink again. And it frightened me. The thought of going for a drink frightened me. And so what I did was something I hadn't done to that point, is I got on my knees and I prayed to God. And I said to God, if I'm not my thoughts and my feelings, take away my mind. And I meant it. If I'm not my thoughts, take away my mind. Because I knew that my mind cannot transcend my own personal experience. I'd only ever been living in my personal experience. And that personal reliance, that self-reliance, was always a reaction to my own personal experience. And I've realised through Sheila, that's not who I am. So I got on my knees and I said, God, take away my mind. And in that moment, I felt, I won't go through the whole thing. There were 3 stages to this awakening that I had to consent to. I had to consent to that I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my feelings, and I'm not my body. And in doing that, I went through 3 levels, 3 stages of surrender. I wasn't expecting it. I only expected to let go of the mind. I didn't realise that it actually leads to the deeper levels. And there was a profound awakening. And in that profound awakening, what awakened was a state of pure consciousness, a state of pure awareness, what I call spiritual awakening. I awakened to the spirit, not the body, not the emotion, not the self-reliance. I awakened to this moment, this pure, stunning stillness, consciousness. And I'd never, ever been in that before. I'd never had that before. And I came face to face with God, of my understanding. God had caught up with me, And but by then, I realised that what I realised was what was running away from God was a false self, basically. So in coming to know God, Steve then became who he was in God, and that's the real spiritual nature that I believe comes from this program. Eventually, when you do surrender, when you do work the principles, it does lead to a God of your understanding. When I say God, I don't mean any God with any label. For me, God is just the absolute reality, that our awareness, when conscious contact awakens, conscious awakens, its true association is itself, of the self. It is consciousness, it's not the body. So in this experience, I was able to come away from this attachment. And in that freeing of attachment, I came to know God. I had a spiritual awakening. And I know since that day, and that was 27 years ago, I've never had a bad day. Bad things have happened. I've never had a bad day. I said to someone once, I said, I'm happy for no reason. I said, what? How can you be happy for no reason? I said, I just am, in a very dramatic way. But that's it. So that's how I got a higher power. I run, I did it, everything, But in the end, it got me. But it will get you. If you work this program, it does lead to a spiritual awakening. But I think for me, one thing I did fall away was the self-reliance can hang out. It can hide out in a very formal way of working a program. That's what I learned. And that formal way, self-reliant way of working a program, we can confuse with therapy. And you might think you're theraping yourself. You might be thinking you're dealing with your feelings. You might, as I did. That's what I did. I was in process all the time. That's good in one sense, and it's okay, but it's not everything. You've got to get to the point of the spiritual surrender as well, to understand what you are as conscious contact, because when you get to the point of conscious contact, awareness becomes a central position of experience to any thought that arises, and you're okay. You're always okay. That's what conscious contact is. The central position of experience to anything that arises. The only thing that will get in the way of that is you separating into a self-reliant pattern that is a reaction to your body disturbance. That's what this program gives us. How profound is that? I say. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you.